Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I'm your host, Josh Peck. We have a very exciting show for you today. This is actually something I haven't talked about in quite a while, but I'm excited to be talking about it today. Let me just make sure we are recording and everything is all set. Yep, everything's looking good. All right. So ancient technology, that's a pretty broad topic and a lot of people take it in a lot of different directions, but I wrote a book called Cherubim Chariots years and years and years ago. This was my third self-published book, so this was a long, long time ago. And in that, I talked about ancient technology in antiquity, how the Bible fits into that. We talked about, and this is where some of this is coming from, but yeah, like how do we deal with the pyramid? How was that made? Who made it? Not only that, but like Vimanas from ancient Indian epics, which sound a lot like UFOs. And if we have time, I don't know, we'll see how long it takes to get through that main part, but if we have time, maybe we can talk about some of the heavenly chariots that the prophets of the Bible have seen. So a lot to get to today, and a very exciting episode, and I'm excited to dig in. If you haven't already, make sure you go to dailyrenegade.com, become a member, because there you can get the full video of this. And the reason that we do that is, again, because we are censored all the time, so we have to have a place where we can put videos where you can actually watch them, but that costs money to do. So it is a subscription thing. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, and if you can do the $100 a year, do that, because you technically get 2 months for free doing that. It's cheaper in the long run. So that is dailyrenegade.com. And also, you get videos like a week in advance. So people who have subscriptions have already had this video, actually, possibly for almost 2 weeks now. I try to stay ahead as much as I can to give as many perks to the members as possible. We are also in the process of updating the website, so that is absolutely happening very, very soon. And there's also some other really, really big announcements, huge life-changing announcements that I can't talk about just yet, but that will be, I'll be talking about that as soon as I can too. Okay, so all that intro stuff aside, let's get right into it. So ancient technology in antiquity and denizens of dimensions collide. So the account that we find in the 6th chapter of Genesis, along with other Jewish sources, is probably the most fascinating account of humans interacting with extra-dimensional beings that we have available today. Genesis 6 tells us how fallen angels descended to procreate with mankind. The offspring created from this forbidden union are known as the Nephilim. The non-canonical book of Enoch gives us even more details concerning the fallen angels, known as Watchers, and their rebellion against Yahweh. Now, along with their genetic material, we read the Watchers brought their supposed gifts to mankind, technological knowledge. So chapter 7 of the book of Enoch begins to describe what type of knowledge the Watchers brought with them from heaven. It says, "And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants." Now, the knowledge of roots and plants, that'll be important a little bit later. But for now, the description of the knowledge handed down from the Watchers is continued in chapter 8. "And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Armoros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel, the signs of the earth. Shamsiel, the signs of the sun, and Sariel, the course of the moon. Now, as we compare the biblical book of Genesis with the non-canonical book of Enoch, we find that these events would have occurred just prior to the flood. Now, concerning the flood, we find a really interesting account that may help provide a different perspective on how some of these secrets survive. So, the Jewish historian Josephus writes, "They, the children of Seth, also were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known. Upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water, they made two pillars, the one of brick, the other of stone. They inscribed their discoveries on them both, and in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone might remain and exhibit those discoveries to mankind, and also inform them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. Now this remains in the land of Syriad, or Egypt, to this day." The ancient non-canonical book of Jubilees continues the story. "And he, Canaan, found a writing which former generation had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and moon and stars and all the signs of heaven." Now, if all of these accounts are to be taken as factual, that may help fill in some blanks and answer some really interesting questions. Was there a type of technology in the antediluvian world, meaning pre-flood? And if so, where did that come from? Did it survive the worldwide flood? So let's talk about the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. Before we do, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Watch this. Concerning the economically unstable times that we live in, it is a great idea to convert some of your savings into real money. Now, there is a big difference between real money and what we call money, which is actually just currency. So our dollar is currency, which fluctuates. Real money, on the other hand, like silver, for example, is a store of value over time. The best way to think of it is like this. If you had saved $1,000 in cash back in the late 60s, the late 1960s, that $1,000 would still be $1,000 technically, but it would buy you significantly less today due to inflation. Now, if you had saved that same $1,000 in silver back in the 1960s, today it would be worth around $28,000. So one of the best ways to protect your purchasing power is in real money, more specifically silver. You can buy and have the metal shipped discreetly to your door, and what most people don't know is that you can actually convert your IRA or even a 401k into physical silver rather than having all of your life savings tied up in the paper fiat system, which is subject to hyperinflation. Go to dailyrenegade.com and click on the Cornerstone Assets Metals banner. This is the only company that I personally trust with this kind of thing. Click on that and sign up to get your free silver report today. One of the financial experts will speak with you to find out the best way to protect your savings going forward in these uncertain times. All right, we are back. The Sphinx and Great Pyramid speculation. Now, according to the account of Josephus and the book of Jubilees, there's not much information given about the pillars of the children of Seth. We are told that there were two pillars, one of brick and one of stone. They were not sure if the pillar of brick would be destroyed by the flood, so in case it was, they built the pillar of stone and inscribed their discoveries on both. And we're told that at least the pillar of stone remained in Egypt, at least in the days of Josephus, which was 37 to 100 AD. So we are also told that these pillars contain the teachings of the Watchers, and it was considered sinful to follow these teachings. So this begs the question, is there anything in Egypt today that may point to more answers concerning these pillars? And where are they? I mean, who got a hold of those? I wonder what world governments might be in possession of those now. unless they were just destroyed. Who knows? Now, what's presented here, what we're talking about in this video, what I'm going to get into is speculative, but it's still really interesting, and it could provide some clues to our ancient past. There is a possibility that the two pillars could actually be the Great Pyramid, what is now the Great Sphinx in Egypt. Author and researcher Robert M. Schoch has postulated, due to the evidence of water erosion, that the Great Sphinx in Giza is far older than most suspect, and that a catastrophe of some kind destroyed any other evidence of an older civilization. Schoch's research was showcased in the 1993 documentary Mystery of the Sphinx, presented by Charlton Heston. In Mystery of the Sphinx, the idea is put forth that the Sphinx was originally nothing more than a large natural stone jutting from the earth. An unknown civilization saw the stone and decided to carve into it, yet what they carved originally is also unknown. After the unknown civilization was destroyed, a new civilization arrived and carved the stone into the figure of a head. Also, a body was dug out and formed from the ground underneath. Thus, the Sphinx we see today was created. Now, if there's any validity to this idea, it may help explain the pillar of stone that contained the teachings of the Watchers. And it's possible that the stone was found originally, that was inscribed with these teachings. Then the flood came. Later civilizations then, for reasons unknown, possibly due to the actions of Canaan, removed the inscriptions by carving the stone down to the image of a head, and they may have created the body to form a complete cherub-like statue in order to protect something. This could be the pillar of stone. And it's also possible that it was originally carved as like a big lion or something, because you can see when you look at the Sphinx, I mean, the head is totally disproportionate. It's way too small for that body. So it could be that the body was created earlier as well, and then later on the Egyptians came and carved just the head down. Now, the pillar of brick, then, that could be the Great Pyramid, specifically the missing capstone. And there's certainly a lot of information and speculation that can be looked at in regards to the Great Pyramid. So for our purposes here, we can just look at the theory that the Great Pyramid could be made of brick, and if the builders were unsure if it would survive the flood, it might make sense that they would inscribe the teaching of the Watchers at the very top, the capstone. So what exactly happened to the capstone? Why is it missing today? And if it is still existent somewhere, that's totally up for debate. But it's interesting that we have these two supposed pillars, one of stone and one of brick, and Josephus says that that's in Egypt. Well, what else could it be? In Egypt, you got this big mountain of bricks, the Great Pyramid, and then you have this thing carved out of stone, the Sphinx. Now, of course, when we're talking about these possibilities, there's a lot of theories, and each one is speculative, but I do believe that truth can be found somewhere between all of these theories. At the very least, it's certainly an intriguing subject. And there's a wide variety of resources available to those who are interested in this topic. So for more information about the biblical connection to the mysteries of the Great Pyramid, I highly recommend the book, The Great Pyramid, Prophecy in Stone, by Noah Hutchings. That's a really interesting book, and it's not that long either. You could probably read it in a day. So make sure you check that out. Let's talk about Nephilim grapes. Now, I know that sounds really weird, but in this idea of ancient technology, the accounts that we looked at earlier, may help explain a very strange verse in the biblical book of Numbers. Numbers 13:23 says, "And they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs." So these grapes were found in the land of post-flood giants. The most obvious question that comes to mind concerning the size of these grapes is, why were they so big? It took two people to carry just one cluster. They must have been enormous. If it took two normal-sized men to carry one cluster, how big were they? But also, how did they grow so large? Because it seems like even the post-flood giants weren't as big as the pre-flood giants. So how did these grapes get so big? Was there some type of technology involved? And what's really interesting, you can look this up. If you look up the Israeli Ministry of Tourism logo, the actual logo shows this scene, and it's two people, and there's a massive cluster of grapes in between them, just as big as the people are. So that's interesting. Now, explanations of this verse range widely, from person to person. Some form speculations about ancient genetic engineering, and that could be post-flood giants may have known some way to do this. And, I think it wouldn't be the way that we're doing it today. I don't think, I don't think they had like test tubes and, syringes and things like that in order to do it. But they definitely had some connection to some type of what we would call today dark magic. And I think that's actually what pre-flood science was. I think it was dark magic, but it was a technology in a sense where they could actually make things happen, and it would be repeatable, testable, all of that. So you might wonder, well, why don't we have that stuff today? There are parts in the world where we might have that stuff today, but I think for one thing, I think if they're part fallen angel, the Nephilim, or even the post-flood hybrids or Nephilim or whatever, they have an angelic connection. They have some type of angelic connection built right into their genes, right into their genetic makeup. So I think that they would naturally have an ability to do things that we just can't do. I think that's part of it. Another part of it is I think that like here in America or other parts of the world, I think there's just too many Christians. There's too many Holy Spirit-filled Christians for a lot of this stuff to work anymore. And the reason I say that is there's ancient accounts of ancient church fathers, the very first Christians, that they would go like from town to town, and they noticed if there was a Christian around, their oracles weren't speaking anymore. Like Apollo couldn't speak when there was a couple of Christians around, and Christians would get persecuted for this. Like it was a big deal the first couple hundred years of the church. So the more that the Holy Spirit that's indwelling believers, the more those believers are around, the less power the kingdom of darkness has. So that's why we have to turn to actual like machines and stuff that can't even replicate, anything like the Great Pyramid. And I'm not saying that the Great Pyramid was necessarily built by dark magic. That could have been built by just regular people who had access to techniques that we just don't have access to anymore for various reasons. So there's a lot of different things to consider when thinking like, why things were so different back then, and why we have all this leftover evidence of megalithic structures that we can't replicate today. And if you want just a great resource on that, look up L.A. Marzulli. He's talked a lot about that kind of stuff. So back to the grapes, some say that could have been ancient genetic engineering of some kind. Others try to diminish the grapes themselves to normal size. But again, why would two people you've seen a cluster of grapes. It's not that big. One person could carry several clusters of grapes. Why would it make note in the Bible to suggest that they put one cluster of grapes on a pole and it took two people to carry them? I don't think these are just regular sized grapes. Now, I don't know if there is sufficient evidence to say that the grapes were not genetically engineered or that they were genetically engineered. I'm not completely counting that out, obviously, but I also don't believe that these were normal-sized grapes because of the description of how they were carried. And again, I mentioned that the Israeli Ministry of Tourism logo shows the larger than normal grapes in its depiction of that event. Now, also, Numbers 13:24 tells us that the place was named Eshol, meaning cluster, because the cluster of grapes. So there was something that was, if those were just normal grapes, it certainly wouldn't seem to be worth naming the land after that, especially considering that they took more fruit than only the grapes. There was something that set these specific grapes apart, and it seems to be their enormous size. Now, I want to mention there is another theory, and this might explain it, the canopy theory. And this might be another explanation on how these grapes grew to such large size. So the canopy theory states that before the worldwide flood, there was a vast amount of water, either in the form of vapor or ice or something, that covered the atmosphere of the entire Earth. And this theory says that this canopy resulted in a higher concentration of oxygen and air pressure throughout the world, and it also says that these conditions would allow for things to grow much larger in size. The theory explains that this canopy would have come down during the flood and would have contributed to the water that drowned the world, which, by the way, that would explain the extinction of many of the larger dinosaurs that probably wouldn't be able to survive as big as they were with the atmosphere that we have today. And there might be scientific evidence showing things actually do grow larger in canopy-like conditions. So in 2006, insect physiologist Alexander Kaiser and his colleagues compared 4 species of beetle, and based on their calculations, they were able to show that modern beetles could grow to as much as 6 inches with increased oxygen. So a lot bigger than they normally would. And so this could help explain why things seemed so much larger in the antediluvian world. If the canopy theory is correct, the atmospheric water that would have created those conditions would have fallen during the flood. And the passage that we looked at in the book of Numbers took place well after the flood. So the canopy theory in and of itself can't explain the size of the grapes, but it might give us a clue. It's possible the ancient giants of Eshel found a way to recreate the conditions of the antediluvian world to make their crops grow larger. We can do that today. There have been people that have done that today. So this would require a certain level of technology, but not as much as you would need for genetic engineering. Again, like I mentioned, we're even doing things like this today with hyperbaric therapy. So this, among other things that we looked at throughout this video, that could help provide some evidence supporting the existence of technology in our ancient past. Let me see, we're about 20 minutes in. Yeah, we can go a little longer. I was thinking about cutting it to members only here, but let's go a little longer. Because I want to talk about some of the ancient Indian stuff, because that factors in too. So let's talk about some extra-dimensional entities of ancient India and some of their technology. So this is obviously in the ancient past as well. The Mahabharata is an ancient Sanskrit epic concerning the history of India. And, you know, if you're Christian and watching this is a Christian channel, but we welcome everybody. If you're Christian, you might be wondering, well, Josh, you know, you're a Christian. Why are you getting into ancient Indian texts? You know, aren't they corrupted? Yeah, and we're going to get into all that. By the end of this, it'll make sense why we're even talking about this. But I do believe that in some of these things, people saw real things, and of course they spiritualized it, and they you know, may have made religions out of it, or had it influence their belief systems, much like we do today. I mean, people will have a really weird encounter with an alien or with Bigfoot or something, and it totally changes their paradigm, and sometimes they make a religion out of it. So I think that kind of stuff can happen. But so when we're going to look at some ancient writings from these books, but think of it specifically the writings that we're looking at. You know, obviously, we're not looking at anything that's going to teach any kind of religious like dogma or anything. But just think of it more as just a historical account of something that somebody saw. Now, you wouldn't look at all of those texts that way. Because they do teach things that, you know, in my opinion, are extremely wrong. If you know, especially if you're a Christian. But the things that we're looking at today, and we'll get into some of what they teach and why it's kind of weird. And I like, my personal belief is I do believe that all these other religions were created by fallen angels, and I am going to talk about that too. So we'll get into all that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, but just wanted to explain why we're looking into these ancient texts. We don't take it as gospel truth, obviously. I believe that this is fallen angel teaching, but it's still good to know what the enemy teaches, so we have an answer for it. So we know how to accurately teach what God wants us to teach. Okay, so the Mahabharata is an ancient Sanskrit epic concerning the history of India. In its estimated 1.8 million words, the Mahabharata is perhaps most noted for the details that it contains about the Kuruk, oh man, these words, Kurukshetra War. I'll probably be doing that a lot throughout this part of the video. And we can find descriptions of chariots, both terrestrial and celestial, or perhaps extradimensional, in other words, of men and gods, little g gods. In the Mahabharata, we find a description of a chariot called the Pushpaka. The Sanskrit word Pushpaka it has a variety of meanings. So from the Monier-Williams Sanskrit to English dictionary, Pushpaka is 1, a kind of serpent. Isn't that interesting? 2, of a mountain. Not a mountain, but of a mountain. And 3, of the self-moving aerial car of Kubera, also Vimana. It was carried off by the demon Ravana and constantly used by him till he was slain by Ramachandra, who then employed the car to transport himself and Sita back to Ayodhya. And yeah, we get that from that dictionary. Now, there's other definitions as well, but those 3 are more than enough to suit our purposes here. So in the texts, we learn of the Pushpaka's ability for air travel. So it says, quote, and he rode on that beautiful and sky-ranging chariot called the Pushpaka that was capable of going everywhere at the will of the rider. End quote. We also learn of the origins of the Pushpaka. Quote, and the Lord of Treasures sat on that excellent seat, the elegant Pushpaka, constructed by Viswakarma, painted with diverse colors. End quote. Now, the interesting thing is that Viswakarma, sometimes written as Vishvakarman, is the deity of craftsmen and architects. So in essence, he can be considered as the little g god of technology, but in the Vedas, he is also seen as the ultimate creative force, later developed as Brahman. He's also referred to, and this might sound familiar, he's also sometimes referred to as the principal architect of the universe. Now, that wording is especially interesting considering the near identical terminology used within Freemasonry. Now, another interesting description is found in the Mahabharata concerning the Pushpaka. Quote, and the son of Raghu then, having worshipped that Pushpaka chariot, joyfully gave it back to Vaisravana. We learned that the Pushpaka was something that was considered as worthy of worship. Not only was the god Viswakarma considered a deity, but also was his creation of the Pushpaka airship. Now, there's a common tradition that teaches the serpent of the Garden of Eden was the one responsible for the development of ancient and modern technology. This view stems from certain verses in the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis. So Genesis 3:17 through 19 says, and unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou return. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken, and that's Genesis 3:23. So the common interpretation of verse 19, specifically where it says, in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, is that Adam would now have to work to prepare his own food. No longer would it be readily available as it was in the Garden of Eden. If Adam wanted bread, he would now have to make it himself. Also, verse 23 states that they had to till the ground. Since tilling ground requires tools and innovation, and since the serpent was the one who tempted them into this position, it's commonly believed that the development of technology resulted from the influence of the serpent. If this is to be taken as literal truth, we end up with a very different picture of what's going on with Viswakarma and the Pushpaka. In the amazing book, Forbidden Secrets of the Labyrinth, Mark Flynn talks about how identities can be assigned to mythological characters to see them from a biblical perspective. If ancient mythology is nothing more than just a deceptive retelling of the truth from the mouth of the serpent and his fallen followers, we can see how assigning identities can be useful in reinterpreting these accounts. If we're to believe there is an ancient evil in the world who is trying to subvert the truth in order to fulfill his own goals, we can expect certain reinterpretations of truth to be prevalent, and they are. So we can look at this in a couple different ways. Viswakarma could represent Yahweh from the view of the serpent. The Pushpaka could represent the serpent himself. This could help explain the alternate definition of serpent for Pushpaka. Viswakarma constructed the Pushpaka, just as Yahweh created the serpent. However, in the Mahabharata, the Pushpaka was something that was deserving of worship, just as the serpent seems to believe about himself. Again, think of it as if Satan were telling the story, how would he tell it? Now, it's also possible that the serpent is identifying himself with Viswakarma himself. If the serpent is setting himself up to be the ultimate creator and deity of architects, the Pushpaka could be a representation of the technology he brought into the world. Technology being a creation of the serpent, or at the very least, a result of the actions of the serpent. We wouldn't need technology without the serpent meddling and the curse happening and everything. That could represent the cunning and wisdom that he believes he has. If the serpent is as self-absorbed as the Bible seems to portray, it would be plausible that he would desire worship not only for himself, but for his attributes as well. Now, setting aside the idea of assigning identities, the story of the Pushpaka brings up some interesting questions. You know, assuming it was the serpent who brought technology into the world. And by the way, when I say that, I'm not anti-technology. I mean, even God said you're going to have to till the ground. Like, that's part of the curse. You're going to have to use it. So it's not like a sin to use technology. It just depends what you're using it for. So I don't believe technology is sinful. Obviously, I'm talking into a webcam and posting this on YouTube and, you know, using the internet and stuff. Technology by itself is not sinful. It's just it's something necessary that is less than ideal. Ideal was what we had in the garden. We didn't need technology because everything was provided for us. We didn't have to do anything or innovate anything. We could just live and enjoy the peace that God gave us. But since the curse happened, you know, since sin came into the world, we now have to kind of do this workaround thing with technology where we now have to provide things for ourselves. Oh, my cat's here. Oh, what are you meowing about? Oh, well, I don't think I've introduced you guys to, this is Jasmine. Let me bring up my camera here. This is Jasmine. She doesn't like being held for very long, but you came up to me. You interrupted my video. That's one of our 3 cats. What are you doing? So anyway, so that was a fun interruption. So let me try to figure out where I was. So assuming that it was the serpent who at least created or manipulated the conditions that would require technology, and in that sense you could say, in a way, the serpent brought technology into the world, would this not mean that technology itself has extra-dimensional origins? So with the influence of the serpent and other extra-dimensional beings, how quickly did that technology progress in the ancient past? I mean, if you think about how fast technology has progressed, even just over 200 or 300 years, I mean, it's insane. That could have happened at any point in human history. Why is it happening now? Why didn't that happen 2,000 years ago? I mean, we're not really any smarter than we were. I mean, we have the same brains. We have access to the same materials. There's even ancient Greek artifacts where they were working on trying to figure engines out. Why didn't that ever happen? Why is it not until now? And I believe that there was a... personally, my theory is that we are in the end times. We're approaching the end times. The veil is getting lifted, but God is releasing his hand of protection on the world. I think there was something stopping technological innovation before because it wasn't the right time, and also I think the more time goes on, the more influence Satan is going to have. So Satan is going to inspire a lot of these technologies that I just don't think he was able to before. because it just wasn't the right time. Also, a lot. I mean, when you think about Christianity today, and you think about Christianity, a couple hundred years ago, it's different. There's I believe that there's a sifting going on. Um, there's there's a lot of deceptions out there, especially because of the internet. I mean, there's so many deceptions. And I think that's why it's so easy for Christians to fall into all these distractions and deceptions and stuff. So, and I think that's just going to ramp up more and more and more. But what about the ancient past? Couldn't that have happened before the flood, or at any time in the ancient past? Couldn't something similar have happened? Might ancient man have had access to, or at least encounters with, higher forms of technology than that which is available even today? It probably would look like magic to us, and there's actually a famous quote about that. So when we think about ancient magic, I mean, maybe that was just technology and we just don't recognize it as that. Or maybe technology is a dumbed down version of magic. Who knows? It depends on how you want to define these terms. So we got to talk about Vimanas. And this is perhaps the most interesting example of possible ancient technology from ancient Sanskrit texts, and it's about Vimanas. So Vimanas are mentioned in the Mahabharata. However, in a text called the Bhagavata Purana, they're more common. So the Bhagavata Purana primarily focuses on Krishna, which in the text, it's the complete incarnation of Lord Vishnu, the Hindu god. And we learn of the Vimana's capability for flight early on in the Bhagavata Purana. It says, quote, "As Dundhikari spoke, a brilliant Vimana flew down from the sky, soft as the petals of a rose. In it were many eternal dwellers in Vishnu's realm, Vaikuntha. Dundhikari," I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, by the way, but Dundhikari embraced his brother Gokarna and climbed into the ship of the sky. So this Vimana, as described, was a true extra-dimensional vehicle. It's described as flying, but it's also carrying the eternal dwellers from Vishnu's realm. And I want to say again, I do believe all of these are fallen angels. Like all these eternal dwellers, that I believe that's fallen angel stuff. But we also learned that this vehicle had physicality to it, since Dundhikari was able to physically climb inside. As described just a moment ago, this account is not a dream or a vision. This is a description of a personal interaction with an extra-dimensional vehicle. So to further support the extra-dimensional properties of the vehicle, another description of the Vimana's capability is as follows. Quote, "The Vimana flashed away into heaven beyond the stars, like a thought, leaving a golden trail in the sky, which dissolved in a few moments and vanished above the perfect silence that had fallen on the gathering of men on the earth below." So we see that the Vimana was not only a flying machine of sorts, but was also able to traverse beyond the stars and into their version of heaven. So these vehicles were also reported as disc-shaped and having faster-than-light travel. By far a physical impossibility, but something that could be possible if from extra-dimensional origins. Quote, "I saw devas fly down to the earth in their mystic Vimanas, which are swifter than light." End quote. So it's literally saying it's faster than light. And that breaks physics. So that would have to be something outside of physics as we know it. Physics as we know it is based on the three-dimensional world that we live in. Here's another one. Quote, "Wondrous Alaka, city of the king of the Yakshas and Guyakas, lord of the nine treasures, one of the Lokapalas, the masters of the earth, fairly swarms with Vimanas, which look like immense flying jewels cut like faceted discs, which fly more quickly than light or time." End quote. Now, the fact that Vimanas are described as disc-shaped flying jewels is really intriguing when comparing that to modern-day UFO reports. The reference to them being able to fly faster than light or time, that's especially interesting. This seems to indicate faster than light travel and possibly even time travel. But in either case, these capabilities would be more plausible from an extra-dimensional device rather than an extraterrestrial due to the physical laws of nature. Aliens on another planet would be bound to the same physical laws that we are. We also learned that these were not only vehicles, they were actually palaces of extra-dimensional beings. Quote, with his yogic powers, Kardama created a fabulous Vimana. It was a flying palace. It was surrounded by fine gardens, set with sparkling lakes, and the palace itself was lavished with the 9 precious stones, encrusting the columns that supported the magical edifice. End quote. This flying palace is described as containing fine gardens set with sparkling lakes. So this seems to be describing water and plant life. Now, keeping in mind that Vimanas are described as originating from a higher dimension, we can compare this to the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was most likely contained extra-dimensional plant life as well, possibly. And this would have been before the fall. But from this, we can see that the higher dimensions are not only populated with intelligent life, but also with non-intelligent life, such as plants. We also read of a biblically familiar ritual that took place before entering the Vimana. Quote, Kardama said to her, go, my love, and bathe in the Bindusaras before we enter the Vimana, end quote. Now, this is reminiscent of the rituals the ancient Levitical priests had to perform before being allowed to be in the presence of Yahweh, which equates to modern-day baptism in Christianity. Again, keep in mind, this is the story if Satan were to tell it. And there, if you're non-Christian and that sounds offensive, I'm going to explain why in a Christian paradigm, because there is a clue in the Bible that suggests that all these other religions were inspired specifically by fallen angels, and why that is the case. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But there are more descriptions of Vimanas found all throughout the Bhagavata Purana. So to fully appreciate the depth and vast amount of information, one would have to look at the entire text in full. However, the goal here is not for an exhaustive study of Vimanas, extremely interesting though they are. Our goal here is to establish the existence of ancient texts that contain accounts of personal encounters with extra-dimensional entities and vehicles and technology. So, as we will see, Vimanas are just one description of such vehicles. So let's talk about Vishnu. Vishnu is a Hindu deity of preservation, but what makes this fallen god, what makes this god so interesting are his various avatars. So the 10 avatars called Dashavatara are described in an ancient text called the Purana Bharati. And it's said that 9 of these avatars have occurred in the past, and the final avatar will occur in the future as Kalki. And this happens at the end of Kali Yuga, which is the last stage of 4 in a cycle that the world goes through. So Vishnu descends in the form of the avatar Kalki to restore cosmic order. And this is foretold in the Bhagavata Purana. Quote, at that time, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear on the earth, acting with the power of pure spiritual goodness. He will rescue eternal religion. Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the spiritual master of all moving and non-moving living beings, and the Supreme Soul of all, takes birth to protect the principles of religion and to relieve his saintly devotees from reactions of material work. Now, the list of avatars varies depending on region and sect, but the standard list is as follows. So first, number 1 is Matsaya, the fish. So Vishnu took the form of a fish to warn Vaivasvata, man, these words, of a great flood. Vaivasvata then built a boat to save his family and 7 sages. Doesn't that sound familiar? This account, of course, is reminiscent of the story of Noah in the book of Genesis. Number 2, Kurma, the tortoise. The Devas and Asuras tried to obtain the nectar of immortality by using Mount Mandara to churn the ocean of milk, and this put the mountain in jeopardy of being destroyed, so Vishnu took the form of a tortoise to support its weight. By the way, isn't it interesting, I'm just going to pause, isn't it interesting that all these ancient religions have like really wild, out there, weird stuff, but then when you read the Bible, it's not like that. I mean, the weirdest that you get is Revelation, but even all of that, it's grounded in prophecy. I mean, it's stuff that's going to happen, but there's no like turtle under the earth or some ocean of milk and a mountain, like you don't. But what's weird is you get that a lot in Gnostic texts, And it's just interesting that in false religions, it seems to get into this really wild territory. And then when you read the Bible, it's like, oh, actually, this is pretty grounded. This makes sense. Number 3, Vihara, the boar. A demon named Hiranyaksha took the earth to the bottom of the cosmic ocean. Vishnu took the form of a boar to place the earth in its original place by carrying it in his tusks after defeating Hiranyaksha. And I think it's funny, too. Non-believers, skeptical atheists, they'll read the Bible and they'll read where like it says that the sun like stayed in the sky for a while. And they're like, oh, that can't physically happen. That didn't happen. That's impossible. But they'll be super respectful of stuff like this. It's just weird. Narasimha, this is number 4, the half man, half lion, the older brother of Hiranyaksha, was given a boon from Brahma, which made it so he could not be killed by man or animal, inside or out, day or night, on earth or in the stars, with a weapon either living or inanimate. Finding loopholes to all conditions, Vishnu took the form of a human with the head and paws of a lion to kill the evil older brother at the courtyard threshold of his house at dusk with his claws while he lay on his thighs. Vamana, not Vimana, but Vamana, the dwarf. Vishnu descended in the form of a dwarf to petition Bali for 3 strides of land, only to later turn into a giant, thereby making the strides much larger. Number 6, Parashurama, the warrior with an axe. Parashurama is the first warrior saint in Hinduism. He was born of earthly parents and was given an axe by Shiva. He was immortal and is believed to still be alive today in the Mahendra Mountains. Number 7, Rama, the prince and king of Ayodhya. Sita, the wife of Rama, was taken by the demon king of Lanka, Ravana. Rama defeated the demon king and saved Sita. Number 8, Krishna, the 8th son of Devaki and Vasudev. Descriptions of Krishna vary. Sometimes he's a young child playing a flute or a prince offering guidance. Sometimes he is portrayed as a hero, godchild, or supreme being. Krishna is said to ride a chariot pulled by 4 horses, which are similar to the horses of Revelation. The rider of the 4th horse of Revelation is death, yet it also says hell followed him. It does not describe a 5th horse for hell to ride, so it's possible these 4 horses are pulling an unnamed chariot for hell, thereby giving him a means to follow death. Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, this is number 9. Descriptions of Buddha vary as well. At times he is seen as leading heretics and demons away from the teachings of the Vedas. Other times he's seen as a teacher of nonviolence. And then finally 10, Kalki, the final incarnation. Kalki is understood as the final incarnation of Vishnu. It is said he will ride a white horse with a sword that blazes like a comet. Descriptions of Kalki seem to line up with the Islamic end-time figure, especially concerning the white horse, and also the biblical Antichrist, as described as the rider of the white horse in chapter 6 of the book of Revelation. Now, what's interesting is in 1877, Helena Blavatsky, which she was really a Satanist, a horribly evil woman, but she published her first major work, a book entitled Isis Unveiled, in which she interpreted the Dashavataras as representing the progression of biological evolution, because of course. It's kind of ridiculous, but she interpreted the avatar list as follows. So 1, Matsya, fish, the first class of vertebrates evolved in water. 2, Kurma, amphibious, and that's the tortoise, living both in water and in land, but not to be confused with the vertebrate class amphibians. 3, Varaha, the wild land animal. 4, Narasimha, beings that are half animal and half human, indicative of emergence of human thought and intelligence and powerful wild nature. 5, Vamana, short, premature human beings. 6, Parasurama, early humans living in forests and using weapons. See how these don't all really fit, but you can tell she's really reaching. 7, Rama, humans living in community, beginning of civil society. 8, Krishna, humans practicing animal husbandry, politically advanced societies. 9, Buddha, humans finding enlightenment, and 10, Kalki, advanced humans with great powers of destruction. So if we look at this all from a biblical perspective, we could recognize Vishnu as an extra-dimensional being, more specifically a fallen angel, and I'm about to talk on how all this stuff developed. But this could explain why Vishnu is sometimes seen as the supreme being and why his story inspires ideas such as, evolution and things like that. This could also explain why he is seen as the individual that will save mankind in the last days, yet descriptions are more similar to the biblical Antichrist. Now, all of these things and more would take away from the true God, Yahweh, by offering an inferior replacement, subverting truth, and leading others astray by keeping them in the bondage of confusion. And this would perfectly fit the description of a fallen angel based on biblical descriptions. So why would an angel want to deceive an entire nation? How did they get into a position where they could even do such a thing? And is this why there are so many different religions and belief systems? Well, let's talk about it, because these questions and more can be answered from understanding an often overlooked biblical passage. Now, in the King James Version Bible, Deuteronomy 32:8 is translated like this: "When the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel." Now, the issue here with that is that last word of the passage. According to the Septuagint and other translations, the phrase sons of Israel should be translated as sons of God. The English Standard Version renders it this way because of that. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Now, that translation makes a lot more sense when we consider the context. And again, you can look at ancient texts and it's sons of God. The KJV, it's a translation mistake. It's just a mistake. It wasn't malicious or anything, but sometimes that happens. When you go back into the ancient text, you actually see that's supposed to be sons of God. So this is talking about when God divided mankind, and that refers back to the Tower of Babel incident. The main reason that the sons of God translations make more sense than the sons of Israel is that at that time, during Babel, the time right after the Tower of Babel, there was no Israel and there were no children to be numbered. However, there were definitely sons of God, or what we would call angels, fallen angels. Sons of God we would just call angels. Now, the short version of the story states that the people of the world, led by the nefarious Nimrod, built the tower in an attempt to enter heaven and or petition the fallen angels. They worshipped these fallen angels as their gods. So when Yahweh dispersed the people and confused their languages, he did so according to the number of the fallen angels that were worshipped instead of him. It was basically as if Yahweh was saying, okay, you don't want to worship me, but you want these fallen angels as your gods? Then you can have them over in your own nations. Now, Yahweh has always offered free will to humans and has always provided a way for humans to return to him if they so chose. Now, if that's the correct translation, it could help explain the origins of all the world's religions. It could also explain why all other religions offer salvation by personal works, yet biblical text states that we cannot attain our own salvation and we are in need of a Savior. This could also help explain the purpose for the formation of Israel. The verse immediately following what we already looked at, Deuteronomy 32:9 says, "But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage." So Yahweh gave the people of the world what they wanted, to worship false and inferior gods. Yet, he still had a plan for people to return if they would so choose. The plan began with Yahweh taking his portion, Israel, beginning with Abraham, and later being born in the same lineage as the Savior of the people of the world required for salvation, Jesus Christ. All right. We got more to talk about. We got to talk about Hebrew visions of chariots. And so we looked at the false things. What about the real things? Because there are chariots, heavenly chariots in the Bible as well, and we could absolutely consider this as extra-dimensional technology. But You guessed it, we are going to save that for the members only section. So if you haven't had a chance to already, head on over to dailyrenegade.com and get a membership today for the rest of this video, because we got a lot of interesting stuff still to talk about. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. I highly suggest, if you can do it, do the $100 a year. You technically get 2 free months by doing that, and it just really helps us out too. But again, just to reiterate why we have to do this, it's because of censorship. I used to have all my videos available for free, but YouTube started deleting them. And their rules always change. It used to be that I couldn't even say Israel I couldn't even say that in a video without the video getting deleted. That doesn't seem to be happening now, but other words will. They'll pick and choose other words. So to protect against that, we have dailyrenegade.com, where all of our videos are, the full versions of all of our videos are available to members. And also you get early access. So I'm recording this on January 30th, and I'm going to try today, if I have time, I'm going to try to get this up on the website today. If not, I'll do it next week, but I'm going to try to get it done today. So members have had the full video of this for 2 weeks now. I don't always get it done that early, but I try to stay at least 1 full week ahead. So by the time you're watching this on YouTube, it's Valentine's Day, actually. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. So yeah, head on over to dailyrenegade.com, get a membership today, join our family. We'd love to have you. And there's a lot of other perks that are coming too. Like I mentioned, we're switching to a much better website, where we'll actually have like a mini form of Facebook there that we can interact with each other. You guys can ask me questions, you can follow each other, and also if you're worried about trolls are pathetic. They're not going to spend their own money to troll somebody. So I have never had a trolling problem on Daily Renegade before, but if it does ever happen, they will immediately get kicked out and refunded. Now, I'm not talking about somebody that just has a difference of opinion and they're being respectful. I'm absolutely open to having those kinds of discussions happen at Daily Renegade. So all that to say, lots of good things coming up. I have some big announcements to make, and starting soon, probably after we do the website change, I'm going to start uploading some videos that are just exclusively for members and not do any part of it on YouTube. And that won't be that'll be like some updates, things just going on, like in my personal life, or because what I want Daily Renegade to be is a place where we can all fellowship, and that's really important. I don't only want to have it be somewhere where I just teach you guys stuff. I mean, I do want that. That's really important to me, and I believe that God put a calling on my life for that. But I also want us to be able to fellowship, and as much as we can online, make it like not a church, but make it like a church. I can't call it a church legally, and I don't want to get into the 501c3 stuff. That's also why it's an LLC. That's why it's a membership thing. 501c3 church status comes with so much restrictions that I really just don't want to deal with. So that's why there's a membership fee. That's why there's all that. But it's a great community, great place to learn, and there's lots of resources there. So once again, dailyrenegade.com. Head on over there. If you are viewing this on the website, just hang on the line. You don't have to do anything. We're going to get right back into the content and talk about more about heavenly chariots, specifically like Elijah and Elijah, Elisha. Who else we got here? Let me see if this part gets into. We're going to talk about could Elijah and Enoch be the two witnesses, and so we're going to get into that in the members only section. So again, if you're a member, just hang on the line. We got some more to talk about. Everybody viewing for free on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else, thank you so much. Glad that you're here. Glad that you joined us. Until next time, take care and God bless.